What's up, everybody? We're back, continuing on this theme of Mr. Reinhard Galen. So today we're going to go over a little bit more detailed timeline of Galen's involvement with Western intelligence, and then we're going to move on to Operation Rusty. So, let us begin. May 42. General Galen, at that time Lieutenant Colonel, became chief of the Fremdheerost FHO, that's Eastern Operations, in May of 42, at which time Lieutenant Colonel Wessel, at that time captain, and Lagerbearbeiter in the section FHO first came into contact with him. In the summer of this year, in the course of a discussion of military situation, Wessel asked Galen whether he believed that Germany would win the war. Galen at this time stated without qualification that he did, but Wessel had the impression that this answer did not correspond with the real opinion Galen had in this moment. In May of 43, Wessel, succeeding Lieutenant Colonel Hare, had become Galen's deputy and closest co-worker, and the question of German military victory again was discussed in the same summer. At this time, Galen asked Wessel whether he believed Germany would win the war, and both agreed that there was no hope. Further discussion took place at length during daily noontime walks, but no one else was apprised of their mutual feeling about this question. Spring 1944. In the spring of 1944, Galen decided that it was essential to take some action towards salvaging the basic files and records of the FHO for the West. It had become quite clear to both Galen and Wessel that after the war there would be only two hemispheres, the East and the West, and that it would be essential to ally with one side or the other. No neutral position would be possible. Galen's decision had already been reached to side with the West. July 20th, 1944. On July 1st, General Galen fell seriously ill. That means 3 weeks prior to the 20th of July attempt on Hitler's life. During the time of Galen's absence, Wessel became acting chief of the FHO. At the time of the bomb attempt, Wessel was unable to get in touch with Galen, but as it turned out, no members of the department were directly implicated and no crisis arose. Galen returned as chief in fall, but never discussed the question of the 20th of July with Wessel. Later, when the latter asked him about it, Galen stated that he had known something about his endeavors directed against the leadership of Hitler, but had considered the matter to be too dangerous to discuss with Wessel or other staff members. Late fall of 44. Towards the end of 1944, a third man, Hermann Bonn, was informed of the intention of Galen to salvage files and personnel of the FHO for eventual transfer to the West. Bonn was at this time head of the collection work, Abwehr Amt under Pickenbrock, later Canaris. All relations between Bonn and the FHO were personally conducted by Galen, who made every effort to place a ring of secrecy around Bonn and the relationship between Bonn and the FHO. Early in 1945, Galen informed still further FHO personnel of his plans with regard to his organization. Hymans and Scholler were advised this time in February. Hare, who, after having been chief of staff of the General of Volunteers, was just building up the Vlasov Division, was informed. January 1945. On the 21st of January 1945, Wessel, on Galen's orders, became G2 of Himmler's Harris Group, and from this time until March 22nd, the date Gen Ob Henrici took over the Harris Group, had close connections with the SS for the express purpose of attempting to prevent Himmler from getting control of the G2 and Amt I work, and Amt 1 work. Himmler had been trying to do so since May of 43, but was in the main unsuccessful inasmuch as he was able to get control over parts of the work only, but never all of it. In connection with Galen's efforts, high-ranking SS officers were treated as honored guests by the FHO, were shown the work, made to feel that nothing was being concealed from them, that the basis for all work was fervent belief in victory, etc. February or March 1945. Galen was presented to Hitler in February or March of 1945 for the first time. Hitler asked him for estimates of the military situation in the East, and when he did not like those that were presented to him, relieved Galen of all his posts. April 9th. After this date, Wessel served as Galen's successor and chief of the FHO. Following his dismissal in early April 1945, General Galen was given the choice of becoming a division commander or being transferred to the Führerreserve des OKH. He chose the latter primarily in order to be able to start the process of removing FHO files, which had been already photostated and microfilmed, to southern Germany for burial. The transfer took place by merely loading files on army trucks, and they were dispersed in 3 places in Bavaria. In the Wild Kaiser near Markhorstein and near Schliersee, Galen's intention upon arrival in the south was to remain as long as possible in his mountain retreat and thus to avoid becoming involved in the anticipated post-war confusion or even losing the just salvaged files of the FHO. April 10th, 45. In beginning of April 45, Galen arrived in Bad Elster, where Bonn was located, for a meeting with Bonn prior to going further south. Wessel was with Galen at this meeting, the purpose of which was to inform Bonn of what to do once the war was over. Agreement was reached regarding the disposition of both files and personnel. Wessel learned for the first time at these meetings of Galen's plans for rebuilding the German intelligence organization. Prior to this time, all discussions had been within a larger frame of reference in terms of salvaging files and personnel for the benefit of the West without a definition of the future or outcome of this step. April 24th and 5th, 1945. On the 21st of April 45, Wessel, who had been in Zossen near Berlin with the task of dissolving the FHO, left for the south. Parts of the files had already been sent on, and Wessel was still in contact with Galen and informed of his movements. May 6th, 45. On the 6th of May, with the approval of General Winter, to whom he was assigned, Wessel went to the Bavarian retreat area to Ruhpolding. Galen, Scholler, and Hinrichs at this time were at the hut near Schliersee, while reserve officer personnel were at the Wild Kaiser hut. When attempts to establish radio contact between the 3 areas were unsuccessful, each area was forced to act on its own. May 20th, 1945. In the middle of May 1945, rumors reached the retreat areas that all German soldiers were hiding in the mountains would be shot by the Americans if caught, since the war was over and there was no further cause for hiding. Accordingly, and because there were indications that the Americans knew about the location of their hideouts, on the 21st of May, the decision was made by Wessel and the group with him, Nock, Heymans, Ritter, Schoenbeck, Golnitz, Hohelsen, Henderson, and Wagenheim, and 3 typists, to report to the Rudolfing prisoner of war camp on the same day. Galen independently reported to the Schliersee prisoner of war camp. According to prior arrangement, members of the groups did not indicate any connection with members of the other groups. No contact was established between Wessel and Galen. In the next few weeks, almost all the personnel were released from these camps. 9 general staff officers had to remain, however, including Wessel and Heymans. End of July. While still in a prisoner of war camp, Wessel and Heymans on the 5th of July were contacted by John Boker, who asked them to cooperate and work for the Americans. Since Wessel had no contact with Galen and thus did not know what decisions Galen might have reached, it was difficult for him to reach a decision on cooperation with Boker. However, Boker was in possession of a letter signed by Galen which proved the Boker-Galen relationship, so that further indecision was unnecessary. Mid-August of 45, weeks later, in the end of July 1945, Wessel, Hinrichs, and Heymans met Galen in Wiesbaden at the Pangstecker house, where Galen was housed with Fuhner, Schollinger, Stephanus, and Lutgendorf. General Galen told Wessel that he had met the G2 of the 12th Army Group and had started the work of rebuilding the German intelligence apparatus. Late August of 1945. On the 21st of August, the Galen Group was sent to the United States. Wessel was left in the Wiesbaden for the express purpose of finding out where Bonn was, and from this time until the end of December 45, had no contact with Galen, largely because of the treatment received by the Galen Group after they arrived in the U.S. Following the departure of General Galen, was transferred to the Blue House at Obersel and discovered that Bonn had also been lodged in the neighborhood, i.e. Camp King, Obersel. In the course of discussions between Wessel and Bonn which ensued, it was agreed that Bonn would try to get in touch with his former co-workers with or without the consent of Galen, since contact had been cut off. A clear statement was made to Bonn by Wessel at this time, and Bonn agreed that any establishment of German intelligence work for the Americans would be on the basis of a unified service, i.e., that there would be no separation of the positive intelligence collection from the military intelligence work as previously. Galen, it was also clearly understood, would be the chief of all the work. Bonn would head the collection staff, and another man, unnamed, would head evaluation work. Although it would later appear that Bonn may have had mental reservations at the time of this decision, he gave his unqualified approval of the organization as outlined to him by Wessel. All right. Now we're going to move on to Operation Rusty. Operation Rusty, use of Eastern Branch of the former German Intelligence Service. Lieutenant General Hoyt Vandenberg, SIG, Washington, D.C. So it appears as though the recruitment and use of Reinhard Gehlen fell under Operation Rusty. Discussion. 1. The key personnel of the Abteilung Fremde Heer Ost, die Generalstabs der Heerst, Division Foreign Armies east of the General Staff of the German Army, and the organization under their control have been used since January of 46 under the direction of G2 USFET in an intelligence operation against Russia and Russian-controlled areas. Tab A contains details on the background activities of the subject personnel before and after the operation was initiated. 2. The organization shown in Tab B consists of two main groups, the Evaluation Group and the Information Group. The former, headed by Reinhard Gehlen, consists of 5 men who direct the Information Group to get the information needed to complete the missions assigned by G2, USFET. The Information Group, headed by Hermann Bonn, prepares the missions for its information gathering agencies, and when the information has been obtained, it turns it over to the Evaluation Group. This group evaluates and collates it in G2 USFET, then receives the information obtained in its original form, the evaluation, and the collation. 3. At present, Operation Rusty covers the Russian zone of Germany as far as the Oder River, as is shown in Tab C, with this area covered by approximately 500 to 600 agents. Attention has been turned to the development of strategic intelligence covering Russia, the Balkans, Poland, and the Near East. The possibilities along this line are outlined in Tab D. Although this phase of the operation is in its infancy, already relations have been established with a member of Zhukov's staff and with an associate of Mikoyan, who is a member of the Politburo. 4. During the period of April 1st, 1946 to October 1st, 1946, the operational costs have been approximately $130,000 in Allied marks, $24,000 in U.S. currency, and certain amounts of foodstuff, soap, tobacco, etc. Tab E contains the method of handling the fund and supplies the breakdown of figures given in this paragraph and discussion of future costs. And 5. G2 USFET considers the organization one of its most prolific and dependable sources, as is explained under Tab F. Also under Tab F are examples of information and evaluation produced by the organization and an estimate of the situation as of February of 46, which subsequent events have proved very accurate. This estimate was made at Camp 1142 for the War Department by the Evaluation Group. A current estimate by this group is found in Tab G. The problems and difficulties encountered in this operation are covered in Tab H. 2. Action recommended. It is recommended that the SSU take over Operation Rusty and conduct it from the United States. Detailed recommendations on the transfer of the operation from G2 USFET to SSU are contained in Tab 1. Details on the background and activities of the subject personnel before and after the operation was initiated. A. The organization within the framework of the former German Army. Considerations, decisions, and measures resulting in the surrender of the organization to the U.S. Army. And C. Activities of the organization from the end of the war until September of 46. The organization as it was in the German Army General, the personnel now employed in Operation Rusty were the key personnel of the Division Foreign Armies east of the General Staff of the General Army. During the war against Russia, this division acted as the G2 division and the Secret Intelligence Service of the Army High Command for the German Eastern Front. The organization of the Division Foreign Armies East was subject to several changes during the something something. See Annex number 1 for a chart of organization at the end of the war. Division Chief. Since 1942, the operator commander of Division Foreign Armies East was Brigadier General Reinhard Gehlen. His main assignments were from 33 to 35, War College at Berlin, preparation for general staff duties. 1940, aide de camp to General Halder. 40 to 42, he was the operational commander of the East Branch of the G3 Division of the General Staff of the Army. And from 42 to 45, he was the operational commander of the Division of Foreign Armies East of the General Staff of the Army. His duties as commander of the Division of Foreign Armies East were to direct the military intelligence service in the East to coordinate the work of the secret intelligence services by issuing directives to it. The U2 Division, the G2 Division, name assignments and duties of the former members of the G2 Division. And it's got a list of some of the people here who worked with Gehlen. I think we can skip over most of that. It's like Wessel, Fritsch Scheing, Albert Scholler, Horst Heymans, Hans Hinrichs, Voldemar Henderson. We have more names of the Secret Intelligence Service. Deliberations, decisions, and measures leading up to the surrender of the organization to the U.S. Army. Deliberations. While working together, the staff members came to similar conclusions concerning the true character and real intentions of National Socialism and of communism. Furthermore, the different officers in question came to the same conclusions concerning the effect that the total defeat of Germany would have on the situation of Germany itself, of Europe, and of the world. Thus, toward the middle of 44, General Gehlen, Lieutenant Colonel Bonn, and Lieutenant Colonel Wessel became convinced that A. In the future, world politics will be determined exclusively by the U.S. and the USSR. B. The U.S. will represent the democratic system based on individual rights of man and will have the responsibility of protecting the Western nations. The USSR will represent the principle of dictatorship, collectivism against individualism, atheism against religion, and state economy against private enterprise. C. A shattered Germany will be between the West and the East in the state of agony. For the next decades, Germany will be in no position to become again an independent factor in European politics. In addition to that, the historical period of national states seems to be over in Europe and is to be replaced by a union of the European nations on an equal cultural and economic basis. This process of development, however, has not yet taken any visible form. Germany, with the loss of the war, will also lose the greatest part of her national strength and most of her economic productivity. For these reasons, she will not be in a position to fulfill her mission as a barrier against the East. Large parts of Central Europe, including Germany, will be overrun by communism. The German people, deprived of their political independence, have to make a decision, either for the East or for the West. The decision for the East would mean a communist Germany combined with gradual loss of her national characteristics to predominant Slavic influence. The decision for the West would mean the possibility of preserving the remaining basic intellect and strength of the German people, and the possibility to become a member of the family of Western nations. G. Therefore, for every far-sighted German who also knows the ultimate Soviet aims, only one decision, namely the decision for the West, is possible without any reservation. This basic decision must be so strong that it will not be influenced by certain minor shortcomings in occupation policy of the Western powers. The inner decision for the West must necessarily bring the effort from the German side to assist the West in preserving Western philosophical principles. 2. Decisions and steps. On account of the above deliberations, General Gehlen made the following decision in late 1944 and informed Lieutenant Colonel Bonn and Lieutenant Colonel Wessel accordingly. In case of the surrender of the German army, all steps will be taken to hand over the entire personnel and material of the Division of Foreign Armies East to the U.S. Army. Necessary preparations will be made immediately within the limits of the situation and the necessity of secrecy. During the period from the end of 1944 until the surrender, the following measures were taken in view of the authority of the above order. The decision itself was made known, completely or in part, to the officers necessary for its accomplishment. Lieutenant Colonel Scheib, Major Heymans Scholler, and Heinrichs, Captains Graber, Boedigheimer, von Lossow, Henderson, and First Lieutenant Teach. Lieutenant Colonel Hare was also informed of the decision. B. Orders were issued to transfer the main parts of the Division Foreign Armies East to the area of southern Swabia and southern Bavaria, since the evaluation of the situation and intelligence reports indicated an occupation of these areas by the U.S. Army. C. Orders were issued to preserve the material gained by the Division of Foreign Armies East during the war by burying it in southern Swabia and southern Bavaria. Orders were issued to organize separate distant camouflaged billets for the key personnel of the division in southern Swabia and Bavaria. Since the evaluation of the situation and intelligence reports indicated an occupation of these areas by the U.S. Army. Orders were issued to preserve the material gained by the Division of Foreign Armies East during the war by burying it in southern Swabia and southern Bavaria. Orders were issued to organize separate distant camouflage billets for the key personnel of the division in southern Swabia and Bavaria with the intention to avoid the danger of being captured before the key personnel had the opportunity to come in contact with an authoritative G2 officer of the U.S. Army. Once this intended contact with the U.S. Army had been frustrated by the rapidity of developments, General Galen decided at the end of May of 45 to report together with the officers with him to the nearest American unit in the hope of being able to contact the appropriate U.S. authorities. Communication with the group under command of Lieutenant Colonel Baughan in southern Swabia had been interrupted since the beginning of May of 45. Due to the unexpected occupation of this area by French troops, this group was not able to report to the U.S. Army until July 28th of 1945. Activities of the organization from the end of the war until September of 46. Activities of the evaluation group. Amount of work done. The evaluation group produced 1945 in Europe, 12 projects totaling 393 pages. 1945-46 in the U.S., 234 projects totaling 3742 pages. 1946 in Europe, 108 projects, evaluation reports, comments, and notes totaling 118 pages. Grand total of 354 projects totaling 4,253 pages. Kinds of work, titles of the more important subjects. 1. 5 studies dealt with the military and political situation in Europe. 38 studies dealt with the Russian, I don't know what that is, QB. 32 studies dealt with the intelligence service directed against Russia. 3 studies dealt with the strategy and organization of the High Command. Some of the following studies were delivered as contributions to the Handbook on the Red Army. They had studies on the estimate of the value of the Soviet armed forces, organization of state elections, districts and military districts, a whole bunch of other miscellaneous stuff. More important subjects among the above: evaluation of the efficiency of the Red Army, factor to which Russian successes are attributed in conditions of snow and winter warfare in general, desertion from the Soviet Army forces, anti-Soviet partisan movement in the interior of the USSR, whole bunch more. Tactics in the Finnish War, Soviet military schools, replacement centers, training areas for combined and unit training. All right, let's move on to number 2, activities of the information group. Preparatory work from September 45 to March 46. Communication with the group under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Baughan, which had been interrupted since the end of the war, could not be established until September of 45. Baughan immediately was transferred from his prisoner of war camp to Oberursel and was put in a position to locate the former members of the Secret Intelligence Service and to renew, in part, the old contacts by personal visits. Thus, it was learned that it would be possible to resume at any time the tactical intelligence and counterintelligence work started from and within the American zone in Austria. Equally favorable conditions for a resumption of work later were found in the British zone. Thereupon, 3 studies were prepared concerning the resumption of the military, political, and economic intelligence work. These studies were presented to the American authorities concerned. Furthermore, an exhaustive historical survey of the developments and work of the German Secret Intelligence Service was finished as well as numerous smaller studies concerning the intelligence service of the USSR. Work from April of 46 to September of 46. On the basis of these preparations, the actual intelligence activities started in April of 1946, Although within the most modest of limits, the steady development of the information group has laid the foundation for carrying out tactical intelligence in the Central European area. Strategic intelligence, however, remains in an undeveloped stage due to the present great difficulties. C. Amount of work done. From the middle of April until the middle of September 46, a total of 513 reports were forwarded to U.S. FET. Of course, the total number of reports received by the information group was considerably higher. After sorting and evaluating, the number mentioned above remained as suitable as for forwarding to the U.S. FET. The following chart lists some of the reports forwarded to the U.S. FET. 7 on strategic intelligence, 141 on identification of units, armored units, movements, etc., 54, 42 on Air Force, airfields, etc., a whole bunch more referencing all the same. All right. Organization of headquarters says not copied. Coverage of the Russian occupation zone not copied. Whole bunch of redacted stuff here. Examples of information and evaluation. Letter from Intelligence Branch G2 U.S. FET. Results of intelligence activities. Result of counterintelligence activities. And estimation of the situation as of February of 46. Operation Rusty to the Chief General Intelligence Branch. From the headquarters of the United States Forces European Theater. Intelligence Branch G2 Division. Dated September 24th, 1946. 1. General. A. Of the slightly more than 400 reports received through this project since its inception in April of 46, approximately two-thirds have concerned Red Army order of battle in Germany. The remainder has included a considerable section on industrial activity and scientific research in the occupied areas and a smaller percentage of order of battle reports from Austria and the Balkans. There have also been few reports of varied nature from within the Soviet Union itself. This report is intended as an outline evaluation of the importance and uniqueness of those reports. In order to implement this purpose, the reports have been broken down into their main groupings and a study prepared of the general level of information received in each particular field, incorporating examples of any information of unique importance received through this source. Red Army Order of Battle, Germany. Military information contained in Rusty reports deals almost entirely with the Soviet zone in Germany. The special emphasis on the federal territory of Saxony and Western Brandenburg and Mecklenburg. Rusty gives concise reports on locations, movements, concentrations of troops, and on military installations, which are usually very reliable. As identifications of units and personalities are rare, value of Rusty to this office should be appraised mainly in relation to what is known about Soviet troop locations. Of a total of 187 Soviet troop locations carried in Germany, Rusty has given information on 47 with a total of 63 important items of information since June 1st of 46. Of this total figure, 29 items were now information, 10 gave exact descriptions of type and size of units, and the remainder gave details on movements, concentrations, and installations of ammunition, fuel, and supply dumps. During the same period, another important source, civil censorship submissions, furnished about the same amount of information, 67 important items concerning 48 localities, but only 21 items were new information, and only one item gave an exact description of type and units of size. C. Rusty has been valuable in determining amount and direction of Russian troop movements into Germany from Hungary and Austria. In establishing location of 5th Shock Army in Schwerin, Mecklenburg, it is clearing up Army Corps and division subordinates in the Magdeburg areas. It is about equal to SSU in reliability and quality of information, though usually somewhat later. Its main defect is, like that of SSU in many cases, that it does not exhaust the intelligence opportunities which it touches. D. One of the most complete reports received here, one recruiting of former German Army officers for the Red Army, came from Operation Rusty, although it is impossible to assess exactly the reliability of the information in this report, since there is no record of other reports from the same source number and the information itself is new. It confirms the persistent rumors of such recruiting and gives valuable details which should make it easier to evaluate future reports on this subject. 3. Industrial activity in occupied areas. A, most of the reports received on this subject have been brief and concerned a specific activity or location. In general, they have served to confirm information received through other sources that have occasionally added new details. It should be emphasized, however, that frequently this information has been obtained more rapidly through rusty sources than through others, and almost invariably it has been proven reliable by confirmation received from other sources. B, there have, however, been several exemptions to the general run of these reports which have furnished unique and valuable information. Notable among these is report number 331, 30th of August, source number 229, on the V weapon factory in Klein-Bundigen. Although the majority of information in this report was already known, it contained two details which are considered of great importance and can be accepted as reliable in view of the fact that the remainder of the report was confirmed through other sources. These were the definite statement that the production line in the plant consisted almost exclusively of A-4 missiles, and the information on construction of a special launching train. Identification of V weapons being produced by the Russians is one of our major difficulties, as they are usually referred to locally as V2s. Therefore, the identification contained herein by the actual German nomenclature is very valuable information on construction of the special train, is valuable of itself, and also because it indicates that unless the train is subsequently rebuilt, experiments which utilize it must be conducted in Germany or in those sections of the Baltic states which still use standard gauge lines. It is doubtful if a train of this type carrying valuable built-in equipment would have been constructed for standard gauge if it had been intended for subsequently to rebuild it. C, information contained in report number 264, 10th of August, source number 304, on the Stalin gasoline plant at Broi, Czechoslovakia, which it is also possible to evaluate as probably true by virtue of partial confirmation from other sources, is uniquely valuable in that it contains many details which were not previously known. 4. Reports on conditions within the USSR. A, although very few of these reports have been received, they constitute information of considerable importance as sources of information from within the Soviet Union are very meager. It is recommended that, if at all possible, more emphasis should be placed on this phase of the operation, as it could possibly achieve a unique importance in this field, whereas in others, our own sources are more nearly adequate. Report number 311, 22 of August, source number 407, on the tank factory in Nizhny Tagil is an example of the importance of this information. It was possible, from the very brief information in the report itself, to check it against information already available and gain the first definite report we had of continuing maximum armaments production in the USSR. The reliability of the report itself could be gauged by the fact that production figures given corresponded with the known capacity of the plant in question. C, report number 232, 5th of August, source number 401, on the German Liberation Army in the USSR, was extraordinarily complete and detailed and contained the only information other than persisting rumors which we have received on this subject. It is a matter of considerable importance both to ourselves and the War Department and should be exploited to the utmost. Although the reliability of source is unknown, the information itself was entirely new. It is possible to evaluate it as probably true in the view of the identification of the Dimitrov camp and the statement that its former use, which could be confirmed from information already on hand, the existence of the camp near Kuybyshev was also subsequently confirmed by an SSU report. 5. Conclusions. Although the majority of reports received have not contained information which it was impossible to obtain through other sources, they have been definitely valuable in the following ways. 1. They are sometimes obtained more rapidly than reports from other sources. 2. They have served as confirming evidence. 3. They often have contained detail not included in other reports. And 4. They're generally very reliable, especially since appropriate evaluating comments are often included with the facts reported. B. The minority of reports, which covers fields such as that of the interior of the USSR, on which other information is not available, is naturally more difficult to evaluate. It is, however, exactly in these fields that the operation assumes a unique importance, and it is felt that this should be emphasized and, if possible, expanded from the few details by which reports of this nature can be evaluated. It can also be stated that their reliability is high. C. An early tendency in the reports from this operation to cover information in a very general terms has latterly decreased greatly. And and reports are now considerably more precise and exact in nature. Occasionally, the impression is given that full possibilities of the source have not been exploited when statements of a general nature appear. In such cases, it would add to the value of the report if it could be stated that further specific details were not available, as this would clear the uncertainty in the mind of the recipient on whether a possible source of more detailed information was as yet untapped. So basically, the general reports on Operation Rusty, which was the inclusion of Reinhard Gehlen and his men in procuring information, particularly in 45 and 46, it seems as though their number one source of information was coming from East Berlin and East Germany, right? The Russian side. We always seem to forget in the modern era that Germany and Berlin were split in half given to the Russians, half to the Allies, right? So it was kind of a petri dish of future relations in one place, right? Fascinating stuff. Results of intelligence activities. General, found in Annexes 1 through 4 are examples illustrating the answers to briefs received from G2. The examples are taken from different fields. No example was taken from the OB field because this subject has been covered sufficiently in Tab A and Tab G. The first example contains an evaluation report concerning the German Army of Liberation in Russia and the efforts of the Soviet Union to imbue German PWs with communism and to influence them to join the German Army of Liberation. The more important, relevant reports are added to the evaluation report. For the preparation of the evaluation report, only intelligence was used, gathered by this organization. Second example, the map represents the more important reports, which came to hand after a brief was received concerning airfields used by the Red Air Force and construction of new airfields. The map shows the more important intelligence gathered from each respective airfield. Scale of map used, 1 to 500,000. 4, the third example. The reports added to this example concern a brief on the field of war economy. The brief requested investigation of the activities of certain former German airplane factories and of factories which formerly produced V-weapons. All in all, 19 important reports were received on the subject. They give a rather clear impression of the production as well as the efforts of the Russians to utilize the existing installations and specialists. 5, fourth example. This example is the answer to an itemized brief concerning purely economic matters. In most cases where economic intelligence is required, the agent must possess the knowledge and experience of an expert on that specific field. As the examples prove, the agents at the disposal of this organization possess these qualifications. Result of counterintelligence activities. The counterintelligence network of the organization is at present observing about 500 persons in the U.S. zone of Germany who are suspected of working for Soviet intelligence. There is clear evidence that 147 of these work as agents for the Soviets. The location, importance, and connections of the identified Soviet residents and agents are charted in Annex 5 on an overlay. In 26 counterintelligence reports since July of 46, approximately 100 suspicious or clearly identified members of the Soviet intelligence have been reported to CIC for elimination. Ooh, elimination, that's a strong word. The thoroughness of Operation Rusty's surveillance of Russian activities in the U.S. zone, despite the very small CI organization employed, is revealed by the fact that out of about 400 people arrested by CIC during the Bingo Swoop operation on 22nd July 46, about 60, representing the main body of agents really working for Soviet intelligence, were known by their activities to the personnel of Operation Rusty. The personnel of Operation Rusty became connected with Operation Bingo when CIB G2 USFET asked for evidence to be used in the interrogation of persons arrested in Operation Bingo. Information in addition to what CIO had on 25 persons could be given. See Annexes 6 to 8. As a result of the further request, a report on the effect of Operation Bingo on Russian circles was made by personnel of Operation Rusty. In an effort to determine who directs the Soviet intelligence in the U.S. zone, agents of Operation Rusty penetrated Soviet organizations. Traces of the deployment of agents or of the INU and the KRU of the MGB, which in the U.S. zone is partly directed by the Soviet repatriation missions, were found. See Annex Low. The INU, Innistrans, Pralovny, or Counterintelligence Division are the most active Soviet intelligence agencies in the U.S. zone at present. Counterintelligence reports obtained by the information group have done much to help the evaluation group clarify the picture on the Soviet intelligence setup. An exact knowledge of the Soviet intelligence services enables the information group to deploy its forces effectively, and the evaluation group to submit reports on these organizations of the Soviet intelligence service. The member of the evaluation group who was in charge of counterintelligence has prepared a monograph for MID. War Department entitled Soviet Intelligence and Counterintelligence. This monograph is based on the study of Soviet methods during the war and on study of German documents, while a USPW will be published in a handbook by MID. The second part of it, without charts, is found in Annex 12. C. Estimate of the situation as of February of 46. The further development of the military-political situation of Russia after October of 45. Note the development of the Russian question in the decades which have just gone by has been accompanied by so much making of propaganda that a really objective consideration of the underlying facts is not very easy for one not familiar with the material. For a better understanding of the train of thought in this work, therefore, in Project B-132 is appended a statement in 1943 by the former Russian Red Colonel about the general lines of Russian policy up to 1943, an evaluation of the reports from the newspapers and the radio between 1st of November 45 and 10th of February 1946 is appended in Project number B-129 as a basis for judging the Russian military political situation. All right, so this kind of gets off into a whole new section. I think we're going to call it here for today. We'll pick up here tomorrow, and we'll probably wrap up the rest of this document on Operation Rusty. And if you enjoy this kind of content, please head over to bloodyhistory.substack.com and sign up for my Bloody History World War II. We're currently covering a bunch of David Irving, Hitler's War, and we're covering The Service, the memoirs of Reinhard Gehlen. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Also, I have signed books. If you're interested in a signed book, please hit me up. Thanks.